Hey everyone. Hey Becca.
Hey, Mac, how are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
It's going.
We had another crazy episode of WandaVision this past Friday, and we're going to take a deep dive into that like we usually do. Uh, in my opinion, probably the biggest episode as far as reveals and just information. So we'll have a lot to talk about. But as always, first we are going to talk about this week's Marvel must-haves.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we've got a new Monica. Actually, yeah, I guess this is her first pop, right?
I think so. Yeah, I don't remember another one.
So sorry about that. But yes, we've got a Monica pop that's going to be coming in March, and she looks just really cool. She's in her like the space suit that we see at one point in this episode. So I know it's available for pre-order right now through Entertainment Earth, and looks like it's going to be $10.99. So you can get a jump start on collecting that. And then we also have a lot more S.w.o.r.d merchandise. Not anything too terribly unique, but this one, of course, it spells out what S.w.o.r.d stands for, and there's a variety of different colors. There's also a dark version, which I kind of like this one.
Yeah, I like that one too.
So, and I think they have a navy as well. So, yeah, plenty of different options there. And then these headbands, I don't think they're particularly brand new, but they're featuring them this week, and we've got the S.w.o.r.d logo on the headband. There's also one that is WandaVision, and let me jump back here really quick. Um, yeah, with the show logo and their smiling faces.
Kind of
And
funny how much they are pushing sword merchandise with this show.
yeah, do you think there'll be more S.w.o.r.d in the future? Like, are they going to be as big as Shield?
I mean, I don't know about as big as Shield. I don't think we'll see our own, sword show. But I do think sword will play a role going forward in the MCU.
That's cool. Oh, we got this Monica shirt here. I I don't particularly like these. Not the Monica image, but I mean just in general. It's like they took a screenshot and put
Yeah,
it on a black t-shirt. But if that's what you want, then that's great. And then we've also got one of Agatha. And looks like she and Wanda are having confrontation in the basement. And then last week we pointed out some pins at the Disney parks. This was also featured on Marvel must-haves, but neither pin is available at Shop Disney, so if they might still be at the parks. But yeah, just some fun stuff to highlight. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things with um, Marvel must-haves, and just to what, 2 more weeks, and then we'll probably be jumping over into Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
yeah, we'll get a week off, and then yeah, like you said, jumping right into the next series. So some exciting new merchandise on the way, I'm sure. The Monica pop is really cool, but that's another one like last week with the twins. I think I'll wait till I can get her in her full superhero costume
Right.
as
Yeah.
my collection.
I think that's a good idea.
Let's see here, a couple comments. First off, thank you, Kyle. That's all I'll say about that. And then hello in Brazil. That's awesome. All right, so we do have a lot of WandaVision to break down this week. So let's get into that. I can pull up an image here. There we go. All right, so this episode, Breaking the Fourth Wall, which I'm not entirely sure this was the episode that broke the fourth wall. It feels like a little bit of a weird title, but
Yeah.
no. One of the first things we see is Wanda in bed with the covers pulled up to her head, and you'll notice hexagons on the covers. So that isn't going away, even though we've already used it to name the sitcom world the Hex. But yeah, hexagons continue to pop up here and there. So interesting.
Yes, indeed.
The twins bust into the room as Wanda is trying to sleep, and they tell her that their game is freaking out and going crazy. And I know you got excited about a visual here.
Yeah, we got a GameCube controller.
Yeah.
It's the best. It's the best controller. It's my favorite controller.
Yeah, I like this scene. I would just kind of jump through a whole bunch of. I don't know what they were started out playing, but it switches to GameCube, goes to Atari. Eventually ends up being just Uno cards, which I thought was funny too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I do love the GameCube and the controller. I grew up on the N64. That's my personal preference, but GameCube is great as well. There is a scene after Wanda eventually gets up. She, by the way, realizes she's still in her Scarlet Witch costume from Halloween. But she goes into the kitchen and, first of all, completely disregards the fact that the boys are fighting. She just walks right past them, which the boys find a little weird. And she goes into the kitchen. She starts making herself breakfast. And I don't know about you, but I didn't hear anything at all when I first watched. There's a radio playing in the background that you can see on if you pull up closed captioning. Aside from that, I couldn't hear it at all.
Yeah, I didn't either. It was our second viewing, and I was reading the captions. I'm like, "What is that? What is that?" And Kyle's like, "What? What?" And I'm like, "It's saying something." He said he listened to it with headphones in, and you could hear it. But yeah, completely would have missed it if I hadn't had the captions on.
Right. And interestingly, the radio doesn't really say anything of note aside from the fact that the radio station is WNDA, so Wanda. I thought that was pretty funny. But aside from that, they were really just talking about Halloween and like what to do with leftover candy and stuff. So nothing too specific there. I have mentioned before that I was really looking forward to this style episode because I'm a huge fan of Modern Family. I've actually been binging it on Hulu for the past 2 weeks. And I felt like Wanda's character was modeled a lot off of Claire Dunphy from Modern Family. Just, like everything about her, the way she did her talking head, interviews, just felt like that was the character. She actually at one point makes a face when she's talking to Agnes, and I'm like, that 100% just looks like Claire. That is, you want to like just stole that face. So yeah, I really like that. Of course, it also draws some inspiration from things like The Office and Parks and Rec, and even a little bit of Arrested Development, I think, as well. So,
yeah, I agree.
How did you like this style of sitcom working into this show?
It was good. It was fun to see what they did with it. I'd be interested to spend more time in this era. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it was still very enjoyable.
Yeah, I really liked it. I think it lent itself very well to what this show was doing at this point, with the way the characters have been kind of separated a little bit, and just kind of getting the chance to hear what they're thinking in such an obvious way. I thought it was clever and made a lot of sense for this episode. So, speaking of the sitcoms that it drew inspiration from, the intro and the theme song was very obviously The Office. That was, I think, the most of all of the intros where like I saw it and I was just like, that's The Office. Whereas some of the other ones was like, okay, this is drawing some inspiration from this and from this. But The Office was just, right out in front. And there are some interesting visuals because this whole intro is just one image after another. And it all is just saying Wanda. So interestingly, it's not saying WandaVision in the beginning. It's just Wanda, Wanda, Wanda. And then we actually even get this image here. I know what you are doing, Wanda. Interesting. I'm not sure what this would mean here. This seems like the first time a villain sort of infiltrated the introduction. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I just thought it was curious.
Yeah.
I had no idea who it might be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting. I'm not sure because I mean, we obviously got the big reveal, and we can talk. If you're watching this, by the way, spoilers, of course. But we got the big reveal about Agatha Harkness being involved in this at the end of the episode. Maybe this is coming from her, but again, still, I don't see why it would. So It's interesting. A couple other interesting pieces from this intro. There is a license plate that shows, I want to say 12/28/22 is the number across the top of it. And that would be Stan Lee's birthday, which is a cool little Easter egg. There's also that at the end of the intro, when you get the WandaVision title, it's on a calendar, and there's a heart drawn on the calendar. But this time, the heart is on the 10th. Whereas in the first episode, if you remember the calendar being a big part of the story, the heart was on the 23rd in that one. So not sure if that means anything, but it definitely moved to a different date.
Right. Yeah, I had noticed that, but I didn't put any time into researching or trying to figure out what the dates might mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find anything. I like to look into the comic numbers and stuff, and I have a few theories about some other ones. Not really theories, I guess, just fun little things that I noticed. But yeah, this one I couldn't come up with anything. I'm not sure. Coming out of the intro, we jump outside the Hex and we see Hayward on the new temporary S.w.o.r.d base talking to the same S.w.o.r.d agent we've seen before. We haven't gotten a name for this character yet, but she tells him that the signal is gone. There's no more broadcast. So that's interesting that the show is no longer, being put out there. I'm not sure why that would have changed.
Yeah, I'm confused about that as well, but I did think that was an interesting comment. So whoever is responsible for it broadcasting, whether it's Wanda or someone else, like they've decided they're done, at least temporarily.
Right. We do jump back into the Hex and we see Vision wake up in the carnival. If you remember from last week, the Hex expanded and took over the S.w.o.r.d base, turned it into a carnival. And everybody's been making fun of the S.w.o.r.D agents as they became clowns. They've kind of become a meme now as well. But we see Darcy, who is working for the carnival as an escape artist, and this was her look inside the Hex. I know a lot of us were excited to see what she would be like inside the Hex. And we did only get a couple of minutes of that before Vision kind of broke her out with broke her out of the mind control, and they could go about their story. So I
like when she's like, fine, I'll go out with you before he frees her, and she's like, but I'm ordering the lobster. I just thought it was so silly. So silly.
Yeah, they get that classic sitcom misunderstanding, right? Like she thinks he's hitting on her, and he's just trying to, the classic sitcom story. She thinks he's hitting on him, and he's actually trying to wake her up from mind control so they can save the world.
Yes.
So back at Wanda's home, the boys start asking some questions, and she asks them, "Where is your father?" And they tell her he's not home. Should we go look for him? And she says to them, "There's nothing. If he doesn't want to be here, there's nothing I can do about it." And that's very different from her attitude in previous episodes.
Yeah, she seems very relaxed with him not being there. And I wasn't sure if it's because she doesn't want him to come home and possibly confront her about what's going on, or if she just doesn't have any control whether or not where he goes in the Hex. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I mean, she does tell them eventually that she pretty much just gives up. Everything's starting to feel meaningless. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but also dark in the same time. Like they are throwing it out as a joke, but it's really like everything's crumbling around her. I think it was Billy who asks about Pietro, and Wanda kind of snaps at him and says, "That man is not your uncle." And this goes back to what we talked about last week, right? When Pietro said, "It's not like your dead husband can die twice," Wanda immediately used her powers to throw him away. And the obvious is that she can't have him saying that in front of the kids who don't know, what happened. But also the fact that Pietro died long before Vision did, he would never have known that Vision died. And now it seems obvious that, Wanda knew that this is not Pietro. So thought that was interesting that they kind of threw that in there so casually.
Mm-hmm.
As Wanda is relaxing, I guess is the way to put it. She's trying to recuperate. You hear a knock at the door, and of course it's who else but Agnes. But I guess Wanda knew it was her maybe, but she just used her magic to open up the door without even a second thought.
Right. And we haven't seen her really use her powers in front of other people in such an obvious way. Like, yes, at the magic show, but that was all. She was like very careful about how her hands were moving, and this was just like, yep, I'm just going to magic the door open, which, yeah, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, we can assume that she knew it was her because Agnes is kind of the only one that knocks on the door now that Geraldine's been thrown out. But I guess there's no way of like she doesn't really know for sure. So yeah. Who knows? I mean, she kind of just, you know, and we see later on that she doesn't care anymore about who's seeing her use her powers. But speaking of Agnes, she does come in and offer to yes, Bekah is wearing her best Agnes outfit right now too.
Double purple, so
she offers to babysit the twins, and they seem reluctant. But in the biggest laugh of the episode, she tells them, you know, don't worry, I won't bite, and then gets the talking head where she says, I actually did bite a kid once.
That delivery was so good.
Yeah. Catherine Hahn has been fantastic, and she is sort of the sitcom veteran, I guess, of this cast. And she's just so funny. She's really, really great in this show. One other quick line that seems like a bit of a throwaway, but that you actually pointed out was pretty interesting. Wanda asks if there's anything she can do to help, and Agnes says, oh yeah, I have a mole on my back. And I mean, you pointed out that it was pretty funny.
Yeah, she said she's a suspicious mole, and then Kyle's like, does that mean she's the mole? And it's like, oh, yeah, maybe she's just like, hey, I'm on the inside here being...
Now, I wonder, that could go two different ways, too, because it could be like she's the mole, you know, working against Wanda, or she's working with Wanda as the mole, like, pretending to work for somebody else. My thought is still Mephisto. I don't know about you, but... We'll have to see where that goes. So as the vehicle, and it is none other than everybody's favorite comic book character, Major Goodner.
Yay.
I'm sure like if you were to type M into Google on Friday morning, it would probably autofill to Major Goodner.
Right.
I'm sure everybody rushed to find out who this character was. And it's pretty much nobody from the comics. There's everybody thought, you know, this might be Reed Richards, this might be Blue Marvel. This might be 100 other characters, but yeah, it turns out it's Major Goodner, who apparently is U.S. Air Force, as you can see on her shirt there. But yeah, no significant Marvel Comics background. What was your thought when Major Goodner was revealed?
It was kind of disappointing. Like, well, who is this person? I actually wondered if she really is U.S. military, or if she's like actually working for S.w.o.r.d. But I guess that I'm not sure how that actually is structured. I'm sure the military contracts with lots of companies, but yeah, I'm just curious is she actually part of a S.w.o.r.d. division and she's U.S. military?
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting as well. There's obviously some crossover here happening, I guess. But here's my theory for Major Goodner. I think this was one of the popular theories for who this aerospace engineer might be. I think this is the Skrull from Captain Marvel, the little girl that Monica met, you know, back in the 90s. We know the Skrulls are still operating here on Earth. We saw that in Spider-Man Far From Home with Talos and Soren working for Nick Fury. And I mean, it makes sense. Monica would have a relationship with this character. She would know a lot about space travel. And I would actually go as far as to say this whole group of soldiers, quote unquote, working with Goodner is probably all Skrulls. I think the fact that they are dressed as Air Force, but you know the vehicle they bring says S.w.o.r.d. I think it seems like they have infiltrated S.w.o.r.d. They took the materials they needed. They put this all together. So yeah, that's my thought. I think this is a Skrull, and I have an agreement with me here. So yeah, that's where I think they're going with this. I think they could be setting up Secret Invasion with this character. So
and we know there's a Secret Invasion series coming to Disney Plus, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that would be the direction they go. Again, and yeah, here's another good point from the original Adventures. A bit of a letdown after hyping up the aerospace engineer. And I get that. It does seem like that is the case. I think a lot of people were expecting a character like Reed Richards. And we pointed out, though, I think that was probably aiming a bit too high. I don't think they would drop such a high profile character into a show like this to make their MCU debut. But again, who knows what else we're going to see in this series? So, we'll have to wait and see. So the next big scene we got was the commercial. And this time it is for Nexus, an antidepressant. And this was a great commercial. I mean, it was dark but funny, like kind of how this whole episode was. And Nexus being one of the most obvious references to Marvel Comics, the Nexus being the point in the multiverse where all the universes converge and it can be used as a way to jump around the multiverse. Wanda is also referred to as a Nexus being, being one who can operate through multiple realities and also just an immense amount of power. So this was more of the obvious reference to Marvel Comics as opposed to like last week's Yo Magic and some of the other previous commercials.
Where I thought way too hard about it.
Well, speaking of thinking way too hard, I used this image here because I wanted to point out the 10.3 or 103. So there was a popular theory about Hayward, and I have my own theory about Hayward, thinking that he might be involved with Ultron in some way. But we also got confirmation here that he was looking to bring Vision back online as a sentient weapon for his own use. And there's a popular theory out there that goes a little bit further and says maybe Hayward is going to be the one that introduces the concept of Sentinels to the MCU. And, that obviously being involved with the future of the X-Men joining the MCU. So I decided, let me take a look. What is Avengers 103 in the comics? And sure enough, it's the Avengers taking on the Sentinels. So, maybe it's looking into it too much, but also could be a subtle little nod there. I thought that was interesting.
That sounds like fun.
So did you have any other thoughts on the commercial before we move on? I mean, it was one of my favorites.
No, I did know that she was a Nexus being. I had read that in some book about the powers of a girl. And yes, so I was like, cool, I understand this one. I like that they said it will anchor you to the reality you choose. And then the world doesn't revolve around you, or does it? And with her being able to jump between multiple worlds and aren't Nexus beings like, isn't there just one for each of the worlds?
Yeah, it's a little vague as are comics in general because they always have retcon constantly. But they more or less there's not going to be another Wanda Maximoff in other realities. She's going to be the only one. So yeah, that's an interesting. And I have to give Kyle some credit, by the way. He pointed out while we were recording Zacks of Life, which is a new episode out now. He pointed out that she is a Nexus being, and I hadn't realized that until I actually read another comic last night that pointed out that she is a Nexus being. So yeah, there you go.
Cool.
Coming out of the commercial, we get a scene where the twins are over at Agnes's house, and earlier Billy complained about noise going on in his head. It's really noisy, and he said it was hurting him. Now he's at Agnes's, and he seems to be very comfortable and very happy, and he tells her, it's quiet here, I like it. And he tells Agnes that she's quiet on the inside. And in the moment, we don't really know anything for sure. I mean, we had our suspicions about Agnes already, but so yeah, just kind of an interesting line that I guess we'll end up coming back to a little bit. For me, though, in that moment, I thought, Billy was being bothered by proximity to Wanda because she was controlling all of these minds, and he's hearing all of the noise of all of Westview all at once, because we saw last week that he realized his powers and could hear Vision screaming, and now he's hearing everyone's pain, more or less. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on that line?
No, I figured it was just I like that you said that the proximity to Wanda, because I just assumed he was able, like, as he's around people, he's able to hear what they're thinking. But yeah, maybe it is everything that Wanda's having to deal with, and then being away from her. It's Yeah, much quieter with Agnes, especially if she's part of this controlling, if she's partially controlling Wanda or whatever. Like, she doesn't have to focus on everyone and everything. She can just, she has more control over, or she's in control of herself, and that's it. I don't know.
Oh, no, I totally agree, and I will come back to that in a little bit.
And when you talked about him hearing everybody, isn't that kind of what Professor X goes through? Like, isn't he always hearing everyone?
Yeah, similar concept. I mean, Billy isn't necessarily telepathic, but he is, dealing with these magical abilities, and we do see that he heard Vision screaming in his head. So it's kind of along those same lines. And actually, I mean, we've already talked about, we know the fact that Agatha Harkness is revealed at the end of this. So I'll just get into this now. It takes on a different meaning, I think, when we learn that Agnes is in fact Agatha Harkness, a witch with, another crazy amount of power. And I think him saying, he was in pain when he was near Wanda, and now it's quiet when he's with Agnes, points out that Wanda is not in control of her power, and she's letting these screams out, whereas Agnes has a whole lot of control, and she can keep everything in and keep it quiet. And yeah, that's just my thought. I think that is what that line was kind of pointing at. I want to also go back and acknowledge this comment here. That's another theory out there, that Major Goodner might not be the engineer, that she might just be somebody, working for the engineer or working with the engineer. The only thing that makes me think otherwise is that Monica never once asks about who the engineer was. Like she says that she's going to meet this guy, and never asks Major Goodner, where is this guy? So that could be worked around for sure, but that is my thought on that. And speaking of Goodner, after the commercial, we do get to see Monica try to use this vehicle to try and drive into the hex. And it is kind of funny how they built up this vehicle for 2 episodes, and it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. I don't know that I thought it would sail right through, but I definitely thought that's how she was going to get back in. How Monica was going to get back in.
Right. Yeah, I thought the same thing. I mean, it felt like a lot of buildup for not much. The hex expels the vehicle, which only gets about halfway in. As you can see, it gets turned into a van or some sort of old truck or something. I'm not sure, but yeah. So there you go. That's what happens with the vehicle. The hex makes short work of it.
Which I thought was weird that it ejected it. Like, it pulled it in a little bit, as we have here, and then like spat it back out. When the hex has clearly taken s.w.o.r.d vehicles and like the s.w.o.r.d tents, even a helicopter in the last episode turned into a hot air balloon. So it's been able to rewrite s.w.o.r.d items, I guess.
Yeah,
why
the first time, even when Monica went up to it, it kind of actually even like sucked her in. So I think the only explanation I would have for that is that when Wanda expanded it, she also may have purposely changed the nature of it to try and just keep other people out at this point. She doesn't want anybody else interfering with anything. That's the only explanation I could offer for that, though.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that Monica had asked for all these different whatever for the vehicle. Is that any of that stuff that's on the back there, any of the gear? It looked like she had some satellites. So I thought maybe it was just, trying to, like, it read it up to a certain point and was like, nope, we're not dealing with any of the rest of this stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that, because obviously there is some other equipment in there that they're trying to use to learn more about the hex. And I guess, yeah, you could be right that maybe it got to that and it was like, I can't convert this into something from, although I guess at this point we're up to like the 2010s, so maybe, but yeah, it just kind of, I guess, can't convert it, which is interesting. So instead of using the vehicle to break into the hex, Monica decides to, after Wu's objection, Monica decides to run in herself, and we get a pretty cool scene, I thought, where she's running through what looks like, I mean, when you're inside the barrier of the hex, it just looks like interference with, like, television, more or less. And you hear voices from Monica's past. You hear her mother, Maria Rambeau. You hear Monica's voice herself as a child. You hear Nick Fury. You also hear the doctor who let Monica know that her mother was dead. And you also hear Wu. And then finally, you hear Carol Danvers. And fittingly, because it seems like Monica somewhat realizes her powers as she breaks through, as you hear Carol Danvers' voice, with Monica in the comics being the third Captain Marvel, I suppose. So yeah, it was a cool scene to get her to this superhero character, and you see that realized through her blue glowing eyes, and then you get her point of view, and you see the more or less the spectrum of light, which is interesting because one of her superhero names. Sorry, I got to go back to my term. One of Monica's monikers is Spectrum, so I like that they did that.
Yeah, at first I thought like the inside of the hex was different, and then I was like, no, this is from her point of view. This is how she is able to. One of the ways she's able to see what's around her.
Another interesting thing about when she does get back into the hex too, and some weird stuff happens with the aspect ratio in this episode. But when Monica breaks back in, the aspect ratio doesn't immediately change. So it goes from like it's widescreen when you're in the real, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it is widescreen when we're in the real world. And then when you go into the hex, it changes to be, an older style, like you would see in sitcoms and stuff like that. And it doesn't change right away when Monica's in there. So I thought that was interesting. And we'll get back to it a little bit more because, like I said, it does some other weird stuff later on in the episode. And I actually do want to show Monica's eyes, if it ever pulls up here for me. There we go. So you can see her blue glowing eyes there. And then we do see Vision and Darcy trying to get back to Vision's home. And they sort of have the comedy angle of this whole episode. And they piece together that Wanda is trying to slow them down and keeps throwing obstacles at them, like making it rain in Westview, and then traffic lights, and eventually construction, and a whole lot of other things. And Vision, of course, given the inspiration for this episode, decides to pull I am out of order a little bit here. Let me see. Hang on. Well, we can just continue to talk about it while we look at Dottie here. So Vision decides to. Oh, I don't have the image, unfortunately. There we go. So, well, he pulls a Jim Halpert and he looks right into the camera and gives the whole, can you believe this face? Yeah, that was a pretty funny moment for this episode too. Not quite as good as I actually did bite a kid once.
But still.
Right.
Work with what you're given, right?
I thought it was interesting too that they're thinking that Wanda is trying to slow them down, but Wanda doesn't seem to be in control anymore. And of course, we learn later on that Agatha is seemingly in a little bit more control. So I'm thinking maybe Agatha was the one trying to keep them from getting back home, because maybe she had plans for the boys and Wanda and didn't want any interference.
Right. Yeah, I thought that I definitely thought that was weird. There's no one on the road and Darcy obeys the traffic signal. I'm like, why? Have you ever come to like driving somewhere and there's nothing on the road, or a light is taking a really, really long time to turn, and you're just like, I am looking all directions, everything around me, behind me. I'm going to drive forward. But yeah, it was very weird to me. I kind of don't think that it's Wanda. I don't know why she would want to prevent them from coming back, or prevent him, unless she knows that Darcy is with him. But
right, and Wanda even points out that she doesn't know where Vision is. She doesn't think that she can do anything to come back or anything like that. So I don't think. Again, I agree. I think Agatha was more the one to make these delays happen. A couple of comments I want to point out here. I 100% recommend watching the show. I will say, though, if you haven't followed the MCU to this point, might be a little bit confusing. So there is that. And yes, Google Drive is very helpful sometimes. But yeah, I think it's funny that you pointed out, like, why are they stopping at red lights? Why aren't they rushing home? I mean, especially if your life has been sucked into a false reality, I think at this point you're kind of just going to go ahead and use your superpowers to go and get yourself there.
Right.
And we have another one agreeing with us here.
Yes.
So Monica does get to Wanda's house and confronts her, and Wanda is less than happy to see her, throws her out of the house, and uses her powers, her magic, right out in front of everybody. And like you said earlier, we have seen that a little bit here and there before. She clearly didn't she didn't care anymore about using it in front of Agnes, but she had still kind of hidden it a little bit. And we actually get a chance to see Dottie and Dennis, the mailman, looking on at, seeing Wanda using her powers. So I thought that was interesting. Also, first time we've seen Dottie in quite a while, and
Yeah.
we've agreed that we think Dottie, there's something to this character.
Yes, I'm still on that train.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, Dennis as well, there was something a little bit suspicious about him.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think he's working for a delivery company called Presto or something.
Yes. Yeah,
Very
which is
magical sounding.
Yep. Yeah, that was a funny little touch to throw in there too. So as Wanda has Monica suspended in the air and then she throws her down, there's sort of this explosion, not explosion, it's too small for that, but you see some energy basically released from Monica, and Wanda sees that and seems to be a little bit taken aback. She notices that Monica is now an enhanced individual, and she's dealing with somebody that could potentially match her power in the Hex, which I thought was interesting that, she sort of hesitates in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to talk about the colors?
Yeah. You pointed out something interesting about, we've seen Wanda's red magic, and now we've seen some more power, I guess.
Well, and we find out later Agatha is purple, but I think you've got Wanda, who's red, and Monica, she's blue. So together, red and blue make purple, and maybe they can take Agatha on together, match her power, and bring her down.
I like it. I would be 100% on that theory if I didn't also believe that there was somebody else. But maybe it's somebody else that's creating this purple magic that Agnes or Agatha is working through in some way. So
maybe she's the mini boss before you get to the big boss.
Yeah, exactly. She's the fake ending. You think you've won the game, but then there's actually another fight afterwards.
I hate those levels.
And yes, the Deadpool superhero landing joke does work perfectly here. So that was pretty funny. Monica keeps trying to convince Wanda to basically shut down the Hex and come back to the real world. And she seems to be getting through to her a little bit, but they actually share this exchange that I thought was interesting. Monica says to her, talking about Hayward, don't let him make you the villain. And Wanda says, maybe I already am. And to this point, at least, we were still thinking maybe there is no villain in this show. Maybe Wanda is the villain of it. And this kind of, pokes at that a little bit here. And I mean, I think at this point we were expecting, pretty heavily that there's somebody else pulling the strings, pulling all the evil strings, maybe. But yeah, I think I like that they, again, look at these theories that fans have. And it's crazy because they don't, because everything was filmed and ready to go long before anybody was talking about what's happening in the show. But they seem to just happen to know what fans are going to think and poke at those theories every single week.
Yeah, absolutely.
The confrontation between Monica and Wanda is interrupted when Agnes comes over and breaks everything up. And like I said, Wanda seemed like she was starting to come around. Monica was getting through to her a little bit, but then once Agnes showed up, that was it. That was the end of it. Wanda wanted nothing to do with Monica. Agnes takes her back to her own house, and Wanda is sitting on the couch, asks about the twins. Agnes says that they are probably playing in the basement. So that's interesting. We'll come back to that in a minute. But Wanda looks around and notices a couple of things. She notices Senor Scratchy, the bunny, and then also notices what I guess is a cicada. I'm not an insect expert, but I think a cicada is probably right.
That's, yeah, the podcast that I listened to mentioned it as a cicada. I didn't actually look into this, but it's definitely, it looks to me more than a fly, like some other type of insect.
Right, which I totally agree, but I do think it's interesting that they would have that in there because pretty recently, actually, I think it was just it was late last year. It was in November. In an Avengers comic, they gave some context on Mephisto, the character we've been talking about for a long time now, and his first ever appearance on Earth. Not his first comic book appearance, but in this recent comic, they went back however many billions of years. And his first appearance on Earth was as a fly, and then as several other animals in subsequent pages thereafter. But I thought it was interesting that they might poke at Mephisto a little bit here with this cicada, because there's really no other significance of the cicada being on the wall that I can think of.
Yeah, I know that they have, like, I think they go underground to not hibernate, but there's different like, I don't want to say breeds, that's probably not the right word, but there's different types of cicadas that come out every like 10 years or 15 years. I remember I was probably 12 the first time I ever saw them, and my parents were like, oh, it's every 17 years these cicadas come out. So I don't know, that's kind of interesting too. Maybe there's some significance to that, but yeah, there's different types. Theory.
Yeah, there's an interesting thought there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's very helpful. But yeah, so maybe there's some significance to that too. Yeah, so weird looking. It just
yeah, there's our cicada right there. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of different ways you can look at it, and like you said, they go underground, and Agnes is telling Wanda to go into the basement. So there's another little connection there. But I do think, just more small evidence piling up for Mephisto there. So Wanda does go down to the basement looking for the boys, and eventually instead discovers this strange dungeon where there are roots growing up the wall, and she finds some interesting artifacts. Also worth noting, as I talked about the aspect ratio earlier, as Wanda makes her way from what seems like a normal basement into this dungeon area, the aspect ratio does change. Mm-hmm. So it goes from what we would normally see inside the hex to that widescreen that we would see in the real world. So makes you think maybe, there's some sort of portal here that this is taking you out of the hex and back into the real world. She also notices an interesting book that has this sort of orange glow to it. There are a lot of different important books in the Marvel Universe. I mean, we've seen in Agents of S.w.o.r.d, they've used the Darkhold, and that has ties to a villain named Chthon, a demon who possesses Wanda at some point. So, I mean, another, potential villain that could show up. And that was another one that has been, on our minds from the beginning, really. But I'm not sure of any information on this book just yet. It might play a role going forward. It might not. We'll have to wait and see on that. Another interesting detail, though, and this is kind of hard to see in this image here, but if you look right around here, there is a detail on the column, and it's sort of a demonic-looking face. So while we are getting the reveal that Agnes is Agatha Harkness, there's still more evidence piling up in the background that Mephisto might be lurking around the corner. This could also be a different character. It could be somebody like Nightmare, who we've talked about in the past as well. But I'm on the Mephisto train here. I think that's the villain we'll get. And then, of course, we do get the song that has been stuck in everybody's head for the last 3 days or so, Agatha All Along, which I learned after my first couple viewings of this episode that it was actually Catherine Hahn performing in this song, which I thought was great. That was a really cool touch.
So she was singing, or?
Yeah, so it's a male voice, or I guess multiple male voices at first, and then you hear Catherine Hahn come in with the female part as well. So yeah, it was really really fun song. It's been stuck, like I said, it's been stuck in everyone's head for several days now. I can't wait for next week's episode, obviously to see next week's episode, but also for the release of this week's soundtrack, so we can all have this song playing in our headphones and in our cars and everything. Not on, just a nonstop loop.
I know. Oh, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this moment. Catherine Hahn was amazing. I love her laugh at the end. Like, I was so giddy throughout this whole segment. I also think it's interesting that they gave us this reveal when they didn't do anything with the aerospace engineer. I mean, or everybody's thinking, oh, who's this engineer, and they're like, yeah, we're not gonna satisfy your theories on that, but
Right.
we are gonna confirm absolutely and in a fun way that everything you thought about Agnes is correct.
Yeah. Also a couple comments on the song here. Yeah, I think definitely inspired by the Munsters theme song, which was fun, and then Kyle takes that a little bit further. The Fall Out Boy song that samples that Munsters theme song. I want to jump back. I skipped over one thing here, and then you actually pointed out something. You actually did the deep dive research on this for me, because I couldn't even identify what show it was that was on TV. Kyle pointed out to me when we were doing Zacks of Life that it is Yo Gabba Gabba, and then you found some more information on it.
Yeah, it took me forever. I was like, Yo Gabba Gabba, WandaVision, and everybody's like, oh, we're so excited that it's canon in WandaVision in the MCU. And I'm like, no, tell me what episode it was. I want to know what episode it was. It's from season 1, and I think the second episode is called Summer. But some Redditor was like, the song is Jumpy Jump Jump. And so with that, then I was able to go look for it. But yeah, I thought it was very interesting that number one, Yo Gabba Gabba was on, because that's much more a preschool show.
Right.
So why would that be on for 10-year-old boys? And this is not a Disney property. Is there some reason? Is there some significance to the show outside of, yeah?
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I honestly, I have no answer. That, like I said, when I saw the show, I recognized the characters, but I couldn't figure out. I had no recollection of what this show was at all, so I couldn't put together anything from that. But after you did some research, I did my thing, looking into the numbers of it. And like you said, this is season 1, episode 2, so 102. So I decided to look into Avengers 102. And another popular theory for a character that might pop up in this show, we actually even had an Easter egg with his helmet appearing in an intro back in episode 2, I want to say. And sure enough, Avengers 102 has the Grim Reaper serves as the villain in that comic. So there you go. Maybe another very strange connection to make, but it's probably digging a little bit too deep, but I had to go for it.
No, probably me digging a little too deep to look for like, what episode of Yo Gabba Gabba.
So that is the end of the episode. But for the first time, we did get a mid-credit scene in this show, and that involved, first of all, another interesting note with the aspect ratio, because while it is Monica investigating Agnes's house, or Agatha now, I guess I have to break the habit of calling her Agnes now. So she's investigating Agatha's house, and while that is in the hex for sure, it stays widescreen. It stays with that real world aspect ratio, and maybe pointing out that Monica is sort of the tether to the real world in some way. I'm not sure what they're saying with that. Did you have any thoughts on it?
Not particularly, but yeah, I see you point that out. That yeah, or Kyle. I'm sorry, Kyle told me that too. That it didn't change in the post-credit scene. Yes, which is very interesting. Or maybe she's able to, the tether to reality, or
Yeah. So, like I said, Monica is investigating Agatha's house, and I noticed actually just watching this today for, I don't know, the 4th or 5th time I've watched this episode, but they like to hide these little numeric code Easter eggs in here. And I noticed the license plate is P8M, and I thought, P8 Pietro M Maximoff, hinting at an appearance of Pietro. And then sure enough, just seconds later, there is Pietro Maximoff showing up. So again, maybe a little bit too deep. Maybe that was a coincidence that they put that there, but seems, P8, I immediately think Pietro. So there you go.
Yeah, that was a fun little fun little way to end the episode, or end the credits, if you will. I'm like, come on, you got to give me more than this.
Right. Yeah, because after we got that great, Agatha All Along song, it, just hits you with the Please Stand By that everyone is so frustrated with right now. Again, Please Stand By is the biggest villain in the MCU. It's the new Thanos. So.
Right.
This did bring up an interesting point, though, because during Agatha All Along, we see that she was the one that sort of manifested Pietro, it looked like, and that he wasn't really there. At least that's what it looks like in the song. And then sure enough, he shows up here. I don't know. What kind of vibe are you getting here? Do you think this is him now not under her control, or is this still a fake Pietro that Agatha is, throwing out into the real world here?
I do think that it's, probably a fake Pietro, that she had, or let's say Agatha is, maybe controlling him, or has him doing her bidding, whatever. Because we'll see next week, maybe. But I feel like he's there to prevent her from figuring out anything else, and I don't think he's doing that out of good neighbor.
Right.
I don't know. What about you?
I think I'm on the other side of the coin here. I think maybe when Wanda blasted him, that might have broken him free of Agatha's control, and we might be seeing, the real Pietro here. Whether or not this is X-Men Pietro or MCU Pietro, that still remains to be seen. But I think this might be an ally going forward for Monica and for Wanda. The only line he gives us is "Snooper's gonna snoop," and that seems like a very Pietro line from the X-Men movies that we've seen him in. So, I mean, that's where I'm at right now. Again, like you said, hopefully we get some information last week. We do only have 2 episodes left, so I doubt we get sort of one of those stretched out episodes where they don't give us any answers. I'm thinking we're in for some craziness over the next couple of weeks.
I certainly hope so. We haven't even seen Vision return back, or we haven't seen Vision get back, and we don't know what happened to the boys. So
right,
there's a lot to still uncover.
There is a specific comic panel in which Wanda is screaming at Agatha, asking, "Where are my children?" And I'm hoping we get that scene played out in this show, because it 100% makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, if we have seen the last of the twins. If we don't see them come up again, that wouldn't shock me. But
I kind of figured we would have them age up one more time and they'd be like teenagers. That's what I was anticipating we would see. But no, I wondered, because I thought, like we've said so many times, things are going to get dark. And I'm like, this is Disney Plus. So if it gets dark, you're not going to be too dark with actual, or with children. I could see them going dark territory with, teenagers or something. But
that's a good point.
But you bring up a good point. Maybe this is the last we see of them, at least in this series.
Yeah, I do think we'll eventually get these characters back in an older form, because Marvel is very clearly building a Young Avengers franchise here. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if we've seen the last of them in this show. I want to acknowledge a couple of comments again here. Why is the Grim Reaper in Marvel? Grim Reaper as a Marvel character is very different from the Grim Reaper that you would have in your mind right now. But that being said, Marvel draws a lot of characters from just mythology. Dracula is a Marvel character. Frankenstein's monster is a Marvel character. So there's a lot of characters like that out there. And then it would be cool if it was actually him and he's now helping the crew, referring to Pietro. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. If we get the last, maybe in the finale or even in next week's episode, we get, assembling of some sort of Avengers here, where it's Quicksilver, Vision, and Monica trying to help out Wanda in this fight. If that is the case, I would think it's not going to be just Agatha that is the villain here, and I'm already in that camp anyway. I think there is a bigger power at play.
Yeah, you do have so many superpowered characters, and at least as far as we know, Agatha isn't on a Thanos level.
Right.
Or, I mean, I know that's a bit of a stretch, but she hasn't been revealed to be so big of a villain that you'd need four superpowered people to match her.
Now, it could be that she ends up using Wanda against them, and we could see a fight of Wanda against those three, which would be interesting as well. But again, we'll have to see. I think there's another character still waiting to pop up.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've had our big cameo yet that has been teased.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Any other thoughts on this past episode before we wrap things up for today?
Monica and Wanda, the way that they interact, like, I feel that Monica in some ways is like Wanda's conscience, and she's so Wanda's like intrigued and threatened by her at the same time, because she knows that Monica can like talk her down. And so that's what's scary about it, because if she talks her down, then she has to give up everything all over again. So I love the dynamic between the two of them, and I hope we get to see more between them, and hopefully as allies and not against each other. But
right, yeah, I totally agree. I think and I could see Wanda being used against them, and it coming down to Monica talking her out of everything that's going on. So that'll be definitely interesting to see how this plays out between those two characters, and of course how things play out between Wanda and Vision.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, Darcy is still there to help them out too. I'm not sure how she's going to help them out, but she's there.
Yes. And she's free of mind control, which she didn't seem like she had been suffering the way other people had, although
Right.
she'd only been under a couple, hours even.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was my thought too. Is I think she wasn't under for so long that it was really, and she said it wasn't good. So it was bothering her in some way, but it wasn't for so long like some of the other characters. So that'll wrap up another Marvel Monday. Join us again next week as we come down to the last 2 episodes of WandaVision, and then we'll be off for a week and then back again for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So yeah, join us again next week. Also later tonight, we have Laughing Place Movie Club, where we will be talking about the new Disney Plus original movie, Flora and Ulysses, which I will be back to talk about that one. And then for more Marvel news, you can join us Wednesday. Join Benji and myself as we talk about the latest Marvel comics to hit the shelves. And then, of course, there is a new Zacks of Life podcast out right now as well. So go and check that out for more Marvel fun.
What did you draft this week?
This week, we drafted Marvel roommates. So what Marvel characters you'd want to live with the most.
That sounds fun.
It was definitely very interesting. I'm excited to hear what people think about it.
Cool.
But thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.